In the quiet, forest-lined village of Palangi Tenga, the people had grown used to silence. The air smelled of teak wood and damp earth, and the nights were so still one could hear a cat walking across dry leaves. But every year, without fail, silence would break on one specific night, the first thunderstorm in the sacred month of Suro. That night, something always returned. They said it started long ago, before anyone in the village now could remember, during a time when that old crossroad by the forest was still part of a trade route. People would pass through with ox carts and lanterns. Some said it was the site of a tragic wedding procession that never made it to the altar. Others believed it was cursed long before that, but everyone agreed on one thing. When the first thunderstorm of Suro arrived, a coffee stall would appear there. No one ever built it. No one ever saw it during the day, but when the rain began to fall like bullets from the sky, and lightning stitched across the clouds like broken bones of light, it was there, standing, waiting. It was always the same. A small wooden stall with crooked legs, a rusted tin roof that hissed when rain hit it, and a dim yellow oil lamp that swung in the wind. Smoke curled up from behind the counter, smoke that smelled too rich, too perfect. The scent of roasted coffee beans wrapped the crossroads in something both warm and wrong. That night, just like every year, the sky opened in a scream of thunder, and the stall returned. Only a few villagers dared look. The rest closed their doors, bolted their windows, and whispered prayers beneath their breath. It was not a night for the living to wander, but an outsider was in town. His name was Armin, a travel blogger known for chasing dark folklore and filming haunted places. He thought of himself as a skeptic, but he loved playing into the fear. He arrived just hours before the rain, with his camera gear, a black umbrella, and a notebook filled with rumors he had collected from other villages. The moment he heard about the stall, he knew he had to see it for himself. Only appears when thunder roars, the village elder had warned. You see it, you turn away. That's how you live. But Armin didn't believe in turning away, so when the first flash of lightning exploded above the hills, and the first drop of rain splashed against his camera lens, he set out toward the crossroads. It didn't take long before he saw it. Faint at first, like a mirage, then clearer to clear, the stall stood under the rain, and touched by time or decay. The oil lamp glowed like an eye, flickering in the storm. The smell of coffee drifted to him like an invitation. Someone was there, a figure behind the counter, tall, unmoving, wearing a white long-sleeved shirt soaked in shadow. Armin raised his camera. No flicker, no blur. The stall was real. Then the man behind the counter spoke, not loudly, but clearly, as if the storm itself parted to let the voice pass through. Would you like a cup? Armin hesitated. Everything in his bones told him to run, but his hands were already reaching into his coat, pulling out his wallet and voice recorder. He stepped forward. Rain clung to his skin like cold fingers. When he reached the stall, he saw the man's face, but only barely. It was wrong somehow, too smooth in some places, too dry in others. His eyes were sunken, but alert. His lips barely moved when he spoke again. It's hot, strong. You'll like it. Armin accepted the cup. The porcelain was white, old, delicate. The coffee inside was black as pitch, with no steam rising from it. Still, it felt warm in his hands the moment he took a sip. The world around him dimmed. Thunder faded. The wind stilled, and suddenly there were others. He hadn't noticed them before, but now he saw 5 customers sitting beside him at the counter, silent, all sipping slowly, none of them blinking. Their clothes looked old, out of place. Their skin was too pale, their eyes cloudy, lifeless. Armin's voice caught in his throat. His body froze. His breath turned sharp and cold. He tried to turn. The man behind the counter was no longer pouring coffee. He was staring directly at Armin. And just as Armin's knees began to shake, just as the shadows behind the stall started to move, The oil lamp went out. Darkness swallowed the world when the oil lamp died. No more thunder, no more wind, no sound, just a suffocating silence pressing against Armin's chest like the lid of a buried coffin. He stood frozen, gripping the porcelain cup. Now cold and heavy, the liquid inside was no longer coffee. It had thickened, refusing to ripple or slosh. Clinging to the cup's walls like something dead, he tried to step back, but his feet felt nailed to the ground. Then came a whisper, soft and slithering by his ear. "Don't spill it." He spun around. No one there. The 5 silent customers were still at the counter. None had moved, but something was wrong, deeply, viscerally wrong. They weren't breathing. No mist from their nostrils. No rise or fall of chests. Their skin, illuminated by distant lightning, looked pale and wrinkled like damp paper. One of them, a woman in a green kebaya, had a dark stream trailing from the corner of her mouth. Armin staggered back. The wooden stall creaked. He turned again, only to find the vendor was no longer behind the counter. The wind returned, but it no longer howled. It groaned, low and mournful, like a funeral song rising from the forest, from the shadows where the vendor once stood. A figure emerged, taller now, inhuman, its limbs stretched too long, and its fingers dragged along the wood with a sound like bone on stone. "You drank," it said, its voice dry and ancient. "You belong." Armin's hand trembled. The cup slipped, the porcelain shattered on the wet ground, and in that instant, the world came alive again. Thunder cracked, rain returned in torrents. The oil lamp lit itself with a sudden hiss. The 5 customers turned toward him at once. Their eyes were wide open and glowing, dimly yellow, like predator eyes in the dark. Armin ran. He didn't look back, didn't want to see what followed. Branches slapped his face as he fled through the trees, feet sliding in the mud, lungs burning with cold air. He didn't stop until the village lights flickered in the distance, and the moment he crossed the old bridge into Palangi Tenga, the storm behind him vanished. The night was quiet again. The crossroads, when he dared glance back, were empty. He reached his homestay before dawn, slammed the door, drew the curtains, and collapsed to the floor, the camera still strapped across his chest. He played the footage. It was corrupted, every frame from the crossroads. Static, unusable, but the audio was intact. In the middle of the silence, beneath the hiss of the rain and the wind, a voice clear and calm whispered directly into the microphone. "He drank, he belongs." Armin didn't sleep that night. He couldn't. He sat in the far corner of his rented room, lights on, fans spinning weakly overhead, the corrupted camera footage replaying in his mind again and again. The whisper haunted him. "He drank, he belongs." It didn't sound like the vendor. It sounded like something older, something buried. By sunrise, he still hadn't moved. He hadn't even changed out of his muddy clothes. His fingers were still clenched around the camera, as though letting go would invite whatever had spoken to him into the room. When the morning call to prayer echoed faintly in the distance, he finally stood. The village had come back to life. Chickens clucked outside. Old men swept their porches. Children shouted in the alleys. Palangi Tenga looked normal. But Armin didn't feel normal. He felt marked. He stepped out of the homestay. Everything was damp but peaceful. The storm had left no damage, no broken branches, no puddles, not even the scent of wet earth, like it never happened. He approached a warung by the roadside where an old man was pouring coffee from a dented kettle. Mr. Armin asked cautiously, "Do you know a coffee stall that appears during storms by the forest crossroad?" The old man froze mid-pour. His eyes narrowed slightly. "Why are you asking that?" "I saw something," Armin replied, "out there, during the rain." It was. "Stop." The man cut him off. He looked around nervously. "Don't say it out loud." Armin felt a chill creep up his spine. The man leaned in. "People here know not to speak of it, especially if you've seen it, especially if you drank from it." "How do you know I did?" Armin asked. The man didn't answer. He just looked at Armin's wrist. There, just below the cuff of his jacket, a strange mark had formed overnight, 3 thin, black lines circling his skin like threads of ink sewn into his flesh. "I didn't put that there," Armin whispered, horrified. "You didn't have to," the old man said. "It's your invitation now." Armin stepped back from the war room, shaken. He hurried through the village. Ignoring the stares, he suddenly noticed too many people looking at him, then looking away, as if they knew. He returned to his room, yanked out his laptop, and started transferring every backup of the audio from the corrupted footage. He slowed the whisper down, reversed it, analyzed its frequency. He even uploaded it to an online spectrogram tool, and that's when he saw it. In the spectrogram's waveform between the static and the whisper were faint shapes, symbols, old, distorted, almost like writing carved into smoke. He enhanced the image. One symbol appeared over and over again. It was the same as the mark on his wrist. He didn't understand what it meant, but something deep inside him, the animal part of his brain, that still feared the dark, knew one thing. That voice wasn't just speaking, it was calling him back. And tonight, the sky was already turning gray again. The clouds rolled in faster than they should have. By late afternoon, the once clear sky over Palangi Tenga had turned into a swirling mass of gray. The air thickened with that electric stillness, heavy, expectant. Like the pause before a scream, Armin stood by the window, staring at the edge of the forest beyond the rice fields, the same direction he had fled from just one night ago. He hadn't told anyone the full truth, not the owner of the homestay, not the curious villagers who gave him cautious glances, and certainly not the old man at the war room. How could he? That stall those people, they didn't just appear, they remembered, and they were calling him again. The mark on his wrist had darkened. What was once 3 thin black lines had now started to shift. When Armin looked too long, the lines almost seemed to move, as if they were pulsing slowly beneath his skin, like veins of ink alive with intention. By PM, the wind returned. It wasn't natural wind, it came in bursts, moving in all directions at once, making the bamboo outside creak like bones rubbing together. Rain hadn't even started yet, but Armin already knew. Tonight, the stall would come back, and this time, they would be expecting him, driven by something between dread and obsession. Armin packed a single shoulder bag, power bank, flashlight, voice recorder, and a silver locket that belonged to his late mother, something to hold, something to remember who he was. Just before sunset, he stepped out into the dying light. As he walked past the village edge, an old woman who had never spoken to him before whispered from her porch, "If you see your reflection in the cup, don't drink again." He stopped. "What do you mean?" But the woman had already gone back inside and shut the door. By the time Armin reached the forked road, the storm had begun. First, the lightning, then the thunder. No rain yet, but the scent of wet stone was already thick in the air, and there it was at the exact same spot as before. The stall, lit by the flickering oil lamp, just like before. Wooden, weathered, as if it had never moved, as if it had always been there. The same 5 figures sat at the counter still, silent, cups in hand. But this time, the vendor was already waiting for him, standing in front of the stall, not behind it. He was smiling. "You came back," the vendor said softly. "You're ready." "I didn't come to drink," Armin said, his voice cracked. "I came to know what this is." The vendor stepped closer. The rain began to fall, light at first, then heavy, soaking the dirt and filling the silence with its hypnotic rhythm. "You drank once," the vendor continued, "and now your eyes are opening. You hear the whispers, you see the shapes, you feel it in your blood. That's how it begins." Armin took a shaky step back. "What are you?" The vendor tilted his head slightly. "We're not what? We're where, and now you're part of the route." The rain fell harder, and behind Armin, without a sound, the road had changed. No longer the forest path he came from now, it stretched into impossibly long darkness, with no end in sight, no trees, no stars, just a road of ash and fog stretching into forever. He turned to run, but his feet wouldn't move. His wrist throbbed, the mark burned, and then he looked back at the stall. The fifth customer's seat, once occupied, was now empty, waiting for him. Armin's breath fogged in the cold, heavy air. The rain soaked through his jacket, yet he didn't feel cold anymore, just weight. A pressure around him, inside him, like something unseen had hooked its claws into his spine, anchoring him to this cursed crossroad. He stared at the empty seat, the fifth stool. It hadn't been empty before, but now, the 5 figures seated at the stall all turned slightly toward him slowly, stiffly as if sensing his hesitation. Their eyes, half-lidded and dull like broken marbles, held a silent question. "Why are you not sitting?" "I'm not one of you," Armin whispered. "I'm not staying here." The vendor's smile stretched just a little too far. "You never had to stay. You just had to choose." Armin turned to flee, but again, the path behind him was gone. In its place stood an endless black road, thick with mist, flanked by dead trees whose branches curled like bony fingers reaching for something to drag into the fog. No sound came from it, no wind, just the soft hiss of the rain and the quiet voice of the vendor behind him. "You stepped into a place between," the vendor said, "and once between, there is no before, no after, only return." "I never agreed to this," Armin shouted. "But you drank," the vendor replied, his voice now layered like many voices speaking as one, ancient and dry. One sip was enough. A violent crack of thunder split the sky. The lamp on the stall flickered wildly. One of the seated figures began to weep, soft, hollow sobs that sounded like they came from the bottom of a dry well. Another began to rock back and forth, muttering something in an old, crumbling dialect. Armin stumbled backward, terrified, but he was surrounded now. The stall, the road, the whispering customers, all enclosing him like a noose tightening. Then, a glint from the pocket of his soaked jacket. The silver locket of his late mother slipped out and dropped onto the muddy ground. It cracked open inside, her photo smiling warmly and touched by time and a short prayer she used to whisper every night before bed. For the first time, Armin felt something real, something that wasn't part of this place. The moment his fingers touched the locket, the whispering stopped, the rain paused, even the wind froze, as if the whole scene took a breath. Then the vendor snarled a sharp, guttural sound, far removed from human tone. "That doesn't belong here." Armin clutched the locket and held it up like a shield. "Neither do I." The road behind him trembled, cracks opened in the soil. The dead trees twisted. Somewhere in the dark fog beyond, something howled along, shrieking wail filled with hunger and anger. The stall's lamp shattered, everything went black, and then a sudden gust of wind, a blinding flash of lightning, a deafening thunderclap. And Armin was alone, standing in the middle of a quiet, empty crossroad. The rain was gone. No stall, no customers, no vendor, just darkness and the soft hum of distant crickets returning to the night. He looked at his wrist. The black mark was still there, but fading, like soot dissolving in water. He didn't understand what just happened, but somehow he knew it wasn't over. The storm had let him go, but storms always return. For the next few days, Armin said nothing, not to the innkeeper who noticed his pale face, not to the villagers who watched him with a strange mix of pity and fear, not even to the elderly woman who had once warned him, now avoiding him entirely because something followed him back. Every night, Armin dreamt of thunder, not the sound, but the feeling of vibration in his chest, a pressure in his skull. He saw flashes of oil lamps, porcelain cups, and lips that never moved but somehow whispered into his ears. And worst of all, he still saw the stall, waiting in the dark. Even though it had vanished, burned out of reality by lightning and memory, It still lived inside him, and every time he looked at the silver locket on his bedside table, he could almost hear the voice of the vendor, low and distant. "You didn't walk away. You're dismissed." One afternoon, Armin stood before a mirror and pulled up his sleeve. The mark what should have faded was still there, thinner now, but darker than blood. Not 3 lines anymore. They had twisted, curling into a symbol like a spiral swallowed by thorns. It pulsed faintly, as if alive. He searched online for symbols, folklore, anything. Hours turned into days. He dug into local urban legends, haunted crossings, rain rituals. Nothing specific until he came across an old blog post archived from 2009. A local ghost hunter, Anonymous, wrote about a phenomenon in South Kalimantan, a warung petter, a phantom coffee stall that appeared during storms, often seen by lone travelers at crossroads. Those who drank from it were marked, and those who sat too long were never seen again. At the bottom of the post, a final entry: "If you've been marked, do not return. They don't offer seconds," they claim. Armin shut the laptop. His hands were trembling, but it was too late. That night, it rained, but there was no thunder, only a soft knock at the window. 3 slow taps. He turned. Nothing. Then again, tap, tap, tap. When he approached the window and pulled back the curtain, his heart stopped. Outside, in the middle of the rice field under the gray sky, stood a single wooden stool and an untouched porcelain cup, and next to it, a handwritten note folded in half, weighted with a small stone. He stepped out in the cold drizzle, barefoot, drawn without thinking. The wind whispered through the grass like voices underwater. He picked up the note. One word scrawled in smeared ink: "Choose." Suddenly, he knew the storm hadn't ended. It had only paused, waiting for him to decide not whether to drink, but whether to sit. Armin stood in the middle of the wet rice field, holding the note that simply read, "Choose." Rain drizzled steadily now, seeping into the soil and into his skin. The world was a hushed gray, no lightning, no wind, no bird song, just the single wooden stool, the porcelain cup steaming faintly despite the cold, and the locket around his neck warming inexplicably. He looked around. No stall, no vendor, no one. But he could feel them watching from beyond the mist, from under the soil, from behind the rain. The mark on his arm burned, the twisted spiral glowing faintly. It was no longer just a symbol. It was an invitation. He crouched beside the cup. Its surface rippled. Though the air was still, the coffee was darker than night, deeper than shadow. As he stared into it, something moved in the reflection of face, but not his, a cracked, weathered face with hollow eyes, grinning with teeth made of coal, and then a voice, not spoken aloud, but pressed straight into his skull. "The 5th seat was always yours, but you weren't ready until now." Armin whispered, "I don't want this," the voice replied. "You came back, you returned to the place that doesn't forget, and now you must replace." His breath caught. "Replace?" He turned around and gasped. There were 5 stools now, lined up neatly in the middle of the field. On the 4th seat sat the vendor, sipping quietly. The other 3 were occupied by shadowy figures, their faces hidden beneath wide hats. Only the 5th seat, the farthest, remained empty. "Why me?" Armin shouted. "I didn't ask for this." The vendor stood. He didn't answer, just placed his cup down and nodded toward the empty stool. And then the locket around Armin's neck burned with light. From within it came his mother's voice, clear and strong. "Don't sit, Knack. Don't ever sit. Walk." He staggered back, heart thundering, and he realized the real choice wasn't between sitting or drinking. It was whether he would stay in their world or fight to return to his own. He turned from the cup, from the stools, from the faces, and he ran through the rice field, through the mud, through the storm building behind him. Thunder cracked again, louder than ever. The field trembled as if the earth itself screamed. but he didn't look back. He sprinted until his lungs tore, until his legs gave out, until he collapsed on warm pavement. Lights above him, real ones. A motorcycle horn blared. Someone shouted. Hands lifted him up. He was back, on the main road, right where he had first wandered off weeks ago. 1 week later. Armin burned the locket. The mark on his arm had faded at last, reduced to a thin scar, but the memory remained, not just of the coffee stall, but of the feeling, the knowing, that somewhere, during every storm in some forgotten crossroad of Indonesia, a phantom warung opens. 5 stools, 5 faces, 5 fates, and now one empty seat again, waiting for the next lost soul.